Good. Thank you, Colin G. My name is John Parker, and I'm lucky enough to have found an incredibly interesting and rewarding way to spend my days. I'm both an investor and a philanthropist focused on children's health. I do this through two different organizations, Spring Hood Ventures, a for-profit venture capital fund focused on children's health, and as a trustee of the Charles Hood Foundation, an 80-year-old private foundation focused on supporting pediatric research. At the Hood Foundation, I'm involved in grant making, and I also established and manage the foundation's early stage venture capital program, which is invested entirely in companies developing important medical solutions for children. I've had the great privilege of serving as a co-lead of the SHIP-MD navigation workstream alongside Dr. Pedro Del Nido of Boston Children's Hospital. Can I get the next slide, please? So our mandate has been to define the role that SHIP-MD can play in accelerating and de-risking the developmental process for pediatric medical devices and what a journey through the SHIP-MD program might look like. We set out to answer a few specific questions that you'll see here. First, what is SHIP-MD's role in the pediatric medical device development process? In other words, what will SHIP-MD do and to what end? Second, what are the criteria for admittance to SHIP-MD? Who will get in? What stage will they be at? How are we going to decide who actually is engaged and enrolled in the program? Third, what is the scope of the services that SHIP-MD will provide to innovators who enter the program? And finally, how do we define a successful journey through SHIP-MD? Next slide, please. We made a good start on answering some of these questions, and after we take a little deeper dive tomorrow, we hope to get your thoughts on these questions as well. We started with the premise that SHIP-MD's mission should be to incentivize pediatric device development to improve health for children. The language around this is important. The mission is not to facilitate trials. It is not to get any one device approved. It is not to gather data. The mission is to incentivize innovators, researchers, clinicians, funders, and many others, to incentivize them to develop solutions, specifically medical device solutions, and to incentivize them to do so with the ultimate goal of specifically improving the health of children. Now, how will SHIP-MD do this? First and foremost, it will facilitate the best possible clinical trials in leading children's hospitals. It will de-risk pediatric innovations by ensuring that innovators have exceptional clinical guidance, targeted regulatory and reimbursement strategies, and strong strategic and financial planning. It will have clear parameters for defining a successful journey through the program. A demonstrably successful exit from SHIP-MD should increase the likelihood of investment, purchase, or partnership, and ultimately of commercial success. It should also validate the involvement of all of the different stakeholders who supported the innovation on its journey. It will help innovators understand and work with all of these different groups they will have to engage with in their journey. This includes hospital administrators, clinicians, researchers, regulators, payers, investors, and other funders, potential acquirers, and of course, patients. Tomorrow, we'll spend more time talking about the journey itself. Since we're calling this the SHIP, we'll abuse the opportunity to put everything in nautical terms. We'll start with boarding, or the entry into SHIP-MD, and discuss both the process of and the criteria for acceptance into SHIP-MD. We'll move on to sailing, or what happens when an innovation is enrolled in SHIP-MD. We'll talk about the core services of facilitating the generation and evaluation of evidence, and some of the other possible services that might be offered to support an innovation's development. We'll finish with disembarkation, or exit from SHIP-MD. Here we'll talk about what defines a successful exit. Again, as we dig into the weeds tomorrow, please keep our top-line goal of incentivizing the development of devices for the benefit of children in the front of your mind. Dr. Del Nido and I look forward to spending more time with you on a deeper dive tomorrow, followed by an engaging panel discussion. And most of all, we look forward to your participation in that discussion. I would now like to hand this over to my friend, Dr. Kalali Eskandanian, to share what the hospital Workstream has been working on. Thank you.
John. My name is Kalala Skandanian. I'm the Vice President and Chief Innovation Officer at Children's National Hospital in Washington, D.C. It's great to be here today on behalf of the hospital's criteria workstream members. I had the pleasure of co-chairing this workstream with Dr. John Davis. Next slide, please. So we met for the past 1 year with the goal to introduce a set of criteria to assess hospitals' readiness to provide a safe environment for the conduct of pediatric medical device research and trials. So the key questions that we set to answer were the following. What are the most important criteria that hospitals must satisfy to participate in the SHIP-MD network? Define common criteria for monitoring progress and collecting metrics. And for the studies of novel technologies, can participating hospitals provide access to racially, ethnically diverse patient populations with a wide range of medical and surgical conditions? So inclusion and equitable access was really key in during all of the discussions that we had in the past 1 year. Next slide, please. So to provide a safe environment for research is really a high bar and requires hospitals to have a rock solid and sophisticated clinical research infrastructure in place. And most top hospitals that have included research and innovation in their mission to better serve patients already have invested in the safe conduct of research. However, most of these hospitals have built their research infrastructure around drugs and biologics. So SHIP-MD will ensure that the discipline of medical device development is equally well understood and appreciated by its participating hospitals. At the same time, we understand that we must ensure that every hospital that serves subspecialty patient populations and is not necessarily in the top 10, 20 best children's hospitals in the country is able to provide a safe environment for pediatric device trials, and therefore can participate in the SHIP-MD network. So with this inclusion criterion in mind, we introduced the hub and spoke model to ensure equitable inclusion of research subjects and their associated geographic locations. So the bottom line is that we must provide equitable access to device trials for every patient that qualifies, and it's the right thing to do. We would love to get your thoughts, so we're hoping that you can join us tomorrow and again on Thursday for our presentation of the hospital criteria workstream. Tomorrow at noon Eastern time, and again on Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern time to learn more. On behalf of Dr. John Davis and the entire workstream, we look forward to seeing you again. And now I will pass on to my good colleague, Dr. Francesca Joseph at Children's National, who is presenting on behalf of the regulatory workstream.
Now you may be wondering why in the world is a pediatrician from a children's hospital presenting on regulatory, but I did spend a large chunk of the early part of my career at the FDA when the initiatives to really get devices labeled and developed for pediatrics was really just getting started. So I was heavily involved in that, and I'm so pleased to be able to continue this work through Children's National and with the regulatory workstream at SHIP. So I want to thank the chairs of the regulatory workstream, Eric Chen and Amar Rachik, for the incredible work that they did to develop this. So next slide, please. So from the regulatory perspective, a few key questions. We want to ask how the SHIP-MD network governance structure can interact with the FDA and how the agency can provide assistance to pediatric device developers. So really creating a strong network with a good back and forth as far as knowledge and support on how to structure that. Define the interaction with the advisory panel for the agency. What does that relationship look like? how can SHIP provide benefit risk information on device perspectives, which are so important for regulatory decision making, really understanding that, especially sometimes review divisions may be lacking in pediatric expertise. So really using SHIP-MD to support that benefit risk, really framing that out so the agency can understand that for any particular pediatric disease. Then define the criteria for the development or use of existing data by the network to facilitate product approval and review. So things like real-world evidence. There's guidance documents out there already about this, but really maximizing the use of that. If there's data that exists on off-label use of devices in the pediatric population, how can that be utilized? And reverse extrapolation. So there's also guidance documents for extrapolation from adult data, but can we reverse that and extrapolate, pediatrics to a broader market? Next, defining the criteria for how the SHIP network should provide pre-screening support for those interested in breakthrough designation. So a device coming through the SHIP-MD network, the SHIP-MD staff itself can look at the device and decide if it's possible that it would qualify for the breakthrough designation program as it stands now, and help then shepherd the innovator through that process for application to get the breakthrough designation. That being said, can we even push that further and perhaps entertain the idea of having a pediatric-specific breakthrough designation, which does not currently exist and would take an active legislation. But if that's something worthy of doing, certainly that's something we want to discuss. And then some more detailed and nuanced questions. For instance, what will happen if the SHIP network of hospitals is unable to provide enough patients for a particular device type? Can adult extrapolation data or reverse extrapolation along with a small confirmatory trial or real-world evidence be an option? So really getting down to the nitty-gritties of the data that would be needed to support a regulatory application. And we really look forward. This is really just a kind of a starting point. As the next 2 days go on, there will be many more questions in the regulatory work stream that come up. And we look forward to a broader discussion and hearing from all the stakeholders. And thank you. And I'll now pass the mic over to, I think, next slide. Is there one more slide?
Yeah, I think there's one more slide for you.
Okay. So key messages and goals, again, for the regulatory work stream is to explore opportunities to address the regulatory needs by refining the current regulatory process. So again, keeping with what is in the legal framework already, how can we really refine that and utilize it to work for pediatrics, but also consider new regulatory options. So here we want to hear from stakeholders what could work. That certainly would be a steeper hill to climb, but something that may be worthwhile. We want to hear from the stakeholders about that to further develop pediatric medical devices. So in effect, de-risking the pediatric medical device ecosystem as a whole, facilitating device approval and review using existing data if possible, and expand the regulatory programs and tools through, say, the Breakthrough Devices program. And then just in general, enhance the clinical trial knowledge across the ecosystem. So thank you. Next slide. I'll just pass on to the finance work stream now, where Chris Lee will present that to you. Thank you.
Francesca. My name is Chris Lee, and I oversee mergers and acquisitions and corporate venture capital for a company called Palladium, which is a 3,000-person professional services company that focuses on the social sectors and issues like public health and global health. I've got a background in the financial markets as a banker, as an investor, government official, and a researcher. And in the last decade or so, have really focused my attention on how to attract capital to underserved markets. And that's what drew me to get involved with SHIP. And I've been very thankful to the team of volunteers that have spent a lot of time with us developing these ideas, and especially to my co-lead, Patrick Brennan from AdvaMed. So please, next slide. So, overall, and in concert with the other work streams, our focus has been, from a funding or a financial point of view, how do we get from where we are today as a concept to spur more innovation in pediatric medical devices to where SHIP is delivering against that mission and supporting itself financially. And you'll see on the page here, we've deliberated and grappled with a host of questions over the last year that relate to that, listed on the page. What is the best construct to design and implement SHIP-ND and to spur it along on its journey to implementation? What are the best or most plausible operating models that SHIP could develop into, and what are the funding sources that would support the most plausible operating models? And what are the critical financial issues to consider as the strategy develops, again, in concert with the regulatory and the reimbursement, the operational issues that we'll be grappling with as a community to launch this into the future. And so we've grappled with these for quite some time, and looking forward to getting the feedback over the next few days. But in terms of where we've landed and our preliminary conclusions, we can go to the next slide, and I can talk you through a few of those. And apologies in advance, you probably require glasses to read these very small bullet points. But the key results for our debates are as follows. Funding is going to be required to advance SHIP from its current phase, its conceptual phase, into a more formalized consortium that would develop the strategy in full and help guide SHIP into an eventual freestanding entity, where again it will be operational and delivering against its mission. Funding for that consortium and the seed funding to get SHIP up and running, we believe is most likely to come from grants, either from the public sector or from the private sector, or a mix of the two. On the public grant side, it's worth noting that may require a legislative mandate, which of course needs to be baked into the thought process here. Once SHIP becomes operational, we believe that it's most likely to achieve success with a couple of key attributes. Here I'm on bullet 3. First, it should be independent. As we've described in the plenary and the other Workstream overviews, this is a systems level intervention, and so no single institution should sort of house this initiative. Second, it should be nonprofit in orientation. As we've been discussing, its mission is to absorb risk as an independent catalyst to get the system to invest more in pediatric devices. And so that role, coupled with the commercial reality of these projects, to us indicates that a mandate around profit maximization or profit seeking is not feasible or indeed appropriate. Third, it should have sector-wide participation, from patient advocacy groups, from the public sector and from the private sector. Many voices need to be at this table and operating in a structured environment to take things forward. And the last attribute really is on its focus as an advisory service provider, providing advice to innovators that are sailing through the SHIP process. And so to deliver on that organizational construct in bullet point 4, you'll see that we believe there are two principal funding sources that SHIP could look to make itself operational. First is fee income. The innovators would be charged fees to avail themselves of the services that SHIP is intending to provide. But recalling the number of expected projects at the beginning stages to come through this and the available resources those innovators will have, we don't believe that SHIP would be fully sustainable on a fee income basis for quite some time. And so grants to SHIP to continue its operations will be a secondary and critical source of income to keep things going. Over time, as SHIP develops, as the market matures, as it develops track record, you can imagine other sources of funding coming in and investing in SHIP on concessional terms or maybe even market rate terms, but that's a bit down the field for where we are right now. And the last two bullets here are reflective of some core design issues that we feel are important to flag now and discuss in the public forum. One is that ShipMD should not hold any ownership interests in the innovators' companies or products that are sailing through the system. If ownership or IP were to be a part of the transaction with these innovators, that could create some real or perceived conflicts of interest. It could make the process itself much more complex and indeed potentially much less attractive to the venture capitalists, angel investors, and philanthropists that are wanting to support the innovators as investment prospects. Lastly, is in the event that the services we're providing are not attractive enough to get the market moving in the way that we hoped. Of course, SHIP can adjust its operating model, it can adjust its services, and that may not be enough in certain circumstances. And in that case, there's been discussion of a separate organization that will become a funding organization alongside the advice-giving organization. And were that to come to pass, we indicated it's our view, which is standard in the financial markets, that the funding and the advice are provided separately and governed separately over time to eliminate those real and perceived conflicts of interest. So those are our key messages that we'll be discussing with you over the next few days and seeking feedback on. And with that, I'd like to pass it to my colleague, Dr. Chester Koh, who's a professor of urology at Children's Children's Hospital and executive director of the Southwest National Pediatric Device Innovation Consortium, and who's been leading quite a bit of work on our reimbursement side. So, Dr. Koh, to you.
Chris, thank you very much. It's been really a great pleasure to work with you and with all the members of ShipMD. I am a professor of urology, pediatrics, and OBGYN at Texas Children's and Baylor College of Medicine. I'm a pediatric urologist by training, and my specialty really is in robotic surgery and minimally invasive surgery. I also serve as one of the PIs, as the PI of one of the FDA supported pediatric device consortia, which we call SWPDC. So with this workstream and this presentation, I'd really like to give thanks to my co-lead, Gordon Schatz of Schatz Reimbursement. He's a lawyer, but he also has had 25 years of experience with reimbursement issues for devices, especially with Medicare. There's many things to give for all the workstream members, as well as many of those that participate in the meetings and conversations of our workstream. I do want to take this opportunity also to thank both American Academy of Pediatrics and the FDA, who have both been tireless advocates in their roles to improve pediatric care, including via the Pediatric Device Consortium program. So many of us who are in pediatrics have personally witnessed the shortcomings of pediatric device development as it currently stands. The solution does appear to be in a familiar and safe environment to us, and that is our nation's children's hospitals, as well as the academic ecosystems in which we sit. Funding drives many things that we do in life, and pediatric device development is no different. Robust reimbursement is needed for both the development of novel pediatric devices, as well as to guarantee access to them by our pediatric patients. It should not be forgotten that pediatric devices are often not developed by the large industry partners, but actually by the small businesses of our nation. Small businesses are the backbone of our economy, and this makes sense because many times pediatric devices is supporting a smaller population, and there may be relatively less device usage, hence the need for small businesses. So with that, next slide. These are the key questions that have been raised in our work stream regarding reimbursement issues for ShipMD. We are looking at what are the reimbursement decision-making criteria and the processes for Medicaid, which is one of the primary funders of pediatric care, as well as private payers to advance innovative pediatric devices. Second, we are looked at how ShipMD can improve reimbursement, and we know that it's quite linked to the FDA regulatory policies, including breakthrough designation. Third, what are the most important and accessible sources of reimbursement both now as well as in the future? And finally, how can ShipMD engage with both national and local payers to optimize reimbursement for all classes of innovative pediatric devices? Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, so these have been the key messages and goals of the work that's done to date. Our goals are really to expedite coverage early in the processes in terms of the regulatory, clinical, and commercial aspects. We would like to see the approval of hospital and physician billing codes sooner, even in the product development stage, and this will allow the data to report the accurate innovative procedures to payers to help make those decisions. And finally, we know that increases in payments are needed to both hospitals and physicians for these innovative pediatric device procedures. So with that, I hope that you can all join our sessions, which are both tomorrow. We are the only session to have both sessions tomorrow and Wednesday, both early in the day as well as late in the day. We will provide live presentations for both of them, as well as an interactive panel discussion, and we definitely are looking forward to your questions and to your feedback on the concept that's been presented. And we hope that you can provide the necessary feedback that is needed around the work that has been done, such that an ecosystem that can create that works both for you and for pediatric patients. So with that, I'd like to turn over to Kamaljeet from CPATH for the rest of the session. Thank you.